Alright, welcome back. We are now on page 20. Okay. And we're going to continue diagramming math problems on a number line to figure out another rule. Okay, so this time we don't have two positives or two negatives, now we have a mix. Okay, so we have 5 plus -3. Go ahead and pause your video, draw that out on your diagram, answer the rest of the questions. Okay, this does go on to page 21. Okay, there's a couple of questions at the top of there. And then come back and we'll talk about your answers. Alright, so 5 plus -3. Your 5 arrow, 5 units to the right. We're counting on. Okay, so we're going to start at that positive 5. The -3 arrow comes back towards the 0 because it's negative, so it's going to go to the left. We circle the number 2 because we're done, and that's where we are. Okay, so that arrow representing the 5 was 5 units long. To the right, because it's a positive number. The arrow representing the -3 is 3 units long. To the left, because it's a negative number. Okay, which arrow was longer? Hopefully you figured out that it was the 5 arrow. That sum was 2, right? And if we represented the sum using an arrow, it would be 2 units to the right. Okay, so far so good? I hope so. On page 21, you have another diagram to draw. Just represent the 4 plus -7. Once you're done doing that, play your video again. We'll talk about that diagram and the questions underneath it. Okay, so just pause it for a quick second, do that diagram, and then hit play again. Okay, so your 4 arrow. Hopefully you drew 4 units to the right, starting at the 0, because that's where we always start. Adding the -7. So we're starting at that 4 because we're counting on 7 units to the left because it was a negative number. We stop at the -3, so we circle it. Alright, so now we have to try and make sense of all this. In those 2 examples, the ones that we just did, we need to figure out the relationship between the length of the arrow representing the sum, again that's the answer, and the lengths of the arrows representing the 2 addends. There's a good vocab word for you. The addends is just the numbers that you add together. Okay. So if you subtract the lengths of the addends, you get the length of the sum. Let's talk about that. So the length of this arrow was 7. The length of this one was 4. 7 minus 4 is 3. And the length of the arrow, if we were to do the sum, was 3. Right? In our last problem, the length of the first arrow was 5 units. The length of the second arrow was 3 units. If we subtract 5 minus 3, we get 2. And so the length of our answer arrow would have been 2. Okay? So if we take the lengths and we subtract them, we get the length of the answer. And again, we have 1 positive and 1 negative. Okay? So then how do we figure out what direction it would point? Well, in the last problem, we said the 5 was bigger, and it was a positive number, and our answer was positive 2. This time, our 7 arrow is longer, and it's a negative number. So notice we have a negative answer. So the longer arrow shows the direction of the sum. Okay. If our longer arrow is negative, our answer is negative. It went to the left. So our answer is to the left of 0. In the last one, our longer arrow was positive. It went to the right. So our answer is positive. We would draw an arrow to the right. And we're going to skip that it tells you to write a rule. We're just going to look at the rule. This is the very bottom of page 21. Again, highlight it, star it, circle it, put flashing lights around it, do something. Okay? Rule, and this is super important. When you add rational numbers, again, integers, fractions, decimals, regular numbers, with opposite signs, so one positive and one negative, opposite signs, it's super important. You do it by subtracting those absolute values and using the sign of the number or the integer with a greater absolute value or that longer arrow. Okay, so when our signs are opposite, we subtract. Even though there's a plus sign in the problem, we're still going to minus it, and the one farther away from 0 is going to carry the sign. Okay, we're going to do a lot of practice with this. Okay, I promise. But at this point, we are finished with note-taking. Okay, we now have rules for adding integers with the same sign. Right, we're just going to add those absolute values. The sign carries through. And we have rules for different signs. We're going to subtract those absolute values. And the one farther away from 0 carries the sign of the answer. Okay, we're going to work with these a lot. Alright? But go ahead and finish taking your notes. Answer the question or questions on the Google form. Please make sure you submit it. Please make sure you answer your questions before you submit your form. Right? And we will practice in class. Okay? So, good luck.